Part 1 expanded approximately 700 words. The Wyoming plains stretched endlessly beneath a pale blue sky, the kind of sky that promised heat even when morning still clung to the earth. Colt Mercer had risen before dawn, as he always did, saddling his horse and heading toward the trail road to pick up supplies from a trader who passed through once every 2 weeks. He expected dust, dryness, and the usual silence of the land. He did not expect to find a broken wagon sitting like a wounded animal in the middle of nowhere. From a distance, it looked abandoned, leaning to one side, its canvas ripped like claws had torn through it. One wheel lay cracked on the ground. The horses that had once pulled it were nowhere in sight, and something about the way the whole setup sagged made Colt's stomach tighten. This was no ordinary accident. It looked like a journey that had gone wrong in a dozen different ways. He clicked his tongue, urging his horse closer. Then he saw her. A tiny figure stood near the wagon, so still she almost blended with the dry brush around her. A little girl, thin, dust-covered, wearing a faded blue dress 2 sizes too big. Her bare feet were cracked from walking, her hair tangled from wind and worry. As Colt approached, she didn't run, didn't cry, she just watched him with wide, guarded eyes that were far too old for a child. Colt slowed his horse to a stop a few paces away. "You hurt?" he asked, keeping his voice low and gentle. She shook her head once, stiffly. "No, sir." Her voice was steady, though he could see how hard she had to work to make it so. Her hands were clasped in front of her, knuckles white. Behind her, faint movement stirred inside the wagon, shadows of more children, peeking out before ducking back in. Colt's stomach clenched. A whole family, stranded out here. He dismounted quickly. "Is your mama here?" The girl nodded. "She's in the wagon. She's real sick." Colt stepped past her and climbed into the wagon. The air inside was hot, stale, thick with the scent of fever. A woman lay there, maybe in her early 30s, though hardship had carved deeper years into her face. Sweat dampened her hairline, her lips were cracked, her breath shallow. Yet even unconscious, there was something beautiful, something gentle about her features. Someone who had loved fiercely and fought hard. Around her, children huddled, 8 of them. The oldest boy, probably 12, stared at Colt with a mixture of fear and defiance. 2 toddlers lay curled together, too weak to do more than blink. Another little girl clutched a ragged doll by the arm. Colt turned back to the girl outside. "How long you been out here?" She shrugged. "Since last night. The wheel broke. Mama said we'd make it to town but she fainted before sunrise." "And your pa?" Colt asked softly. Her throat worked, but she said nothing. That was answer enough. Colt exhaled slowly. No settler wagon should be stranded out here, not with so many little ones. Not with a woman sick enough to die if help didn't come soon. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Liddy." "Liddy." He knelt down so they were eye to eye. "How many brothers and sisters you have?" "9 of us," she said quietly. "Mama had all of us after Papa left." She hesitated, but something in Colt's steady gaze made her add, almost bitterly, "Nobody wanted my mama with so many kids. People said she's too much trouble. Too big a burden." Colt's jaw tightened. He looked at the wagon again, at the hungry, scared faces, at the brave little girl standing between them and the world. He understood now why her eyes were old. Part 2 expanded approximately 700 words. The journey back to Mercer Ranch stretched across miles of open prairie, but to the exhausted children it must have felt like crossing a continent. Colt made the trip slow, careful, steady, mindful of the woman lying feverish in the supply wagon and of the 9 children whose lives now depended on him. He had placed the oldest boy, Jonas, behind him on the saddle. The boy was stiff with distrust, arms wrapped so tightly around Colt's waist it was more instinct than willingness. The younger children rode in the wagon, wrapped in every blanket Colt had managed to haul out of his emergency trunk. The littlest toddler whimpered now and then, the sound so soft it barely reached above the creaking of wheels. Liddy rode on the bench beside Colt for a while, watching everything with the solemn focus of someone trained by hardship to be older than her years. The wind blew dust across her small face, but she didn't complain. She just stared ahead, keeping her hands folded in her lap. Halfway through the ride, the woman, Elena, stirred. Her eyelids fluttered, brows knitting in pain. Colt pulled the wagon reins and leaned back so she could see him. "Easy now," he murmured. "You're safe." Her eyes drifted to the children first, scanning them the way a mother does even when she's barely conscious. Then they landed on Colt, confusion tightening her expression. Where are you taking my children? Her voice cracked, barely a whisper. Colt softened his tone. Home. Elena tried to sit up, failed, falling back with a soft cry. No, sir, my children, don't take them from me. Please, they're all I have. The words were raw, desperate. Colt shook his head quickly. No one's taking them from you, he said with steady certainty. They're coming with you. All of you are coming to my ranch. Her eyes glistened, a tear sliding down across her temple before she slipped back into unconsciousness. Beside Colt, Liddy's breath shook. People always want the kids, she said quietly. But not Mama. They say she's too much work. Colt tightened his hold on the reins. People who say that don't know what family means. Liddy looked up at him, studying him like she was trying to find the lie, but there wasn't one. As the ranch came into view, a wide stretch of pastureland, a big barn, and a house with smoke curling from the chimney, the children sat up straighter. Jonas squinted, trying to hide the flicker of hope in his eyes. One of the toddlers pointed, squealing softly. Even Liddy's shoulders loosened just a little. When they arrived, the ranch hands paused mid-task. Briggs, Colt's trusted foreman, pushed his hat back on his head and stared as 9 dusty children tumbled out of the wagon like scattered beans. Boss, Briggs drawled, you plannin' on startin' a school? 'Cause this looks like enrollment day. Some of the hands chuckled, but Colt wasn't in the mood for jokes. Get the doctor, he said. And clean beds. The little ones get food first, light food. Jonas, you help Briggs unload the wagon. Liddy, you stay with me. They blinked at him, unsure if this was real. No one ever barked orders on their behalf before. The doctor, a crusty but competent man named McCall, rushed into the house, already rolling up his sleeves. Colt carried Elena inside himself, careful, steady, lowering her onto a bed he had his housekeeper prepare in the downstairs room. She'll need broth, McCall muttered. Rest, clean water, and a few days without worry, which'll be the hardest part, seeing as she's got half a small town for children. Colt ignored the last remark. When he stepped back outside, he found Liddy standing alone on the porch, hugging her elbows tightly. The noise of children being cared for, fed, settled, cleaned, filled the air, something between chaos and relief. She looked up at him. Why are you helping us? Her voice was small, but the question cut deep. Colt crouched to meet her eyes. Because you needed help, he said simply. And because no family, especially a family this strong, should be left alone on the side of the road. Liddy's lip trembled. She bit it hard, refusing to cry. Mama says we're too many. That we scare people off. Part 3 expanded approximately 700 words. The days at Mercer Ranch settled into a rhythm that was foreign to Elena and her children but comforting in its predictability. The sun rose over wide fields, painting the barn and the house in gold, and the wind carried a scent of hay and horses that made the world feel safe for the first time in years. Colt Mercer's ranch had always been a place of hard work and quiet solitude, but now it thrummed with life, children laughing, horses whinnying, the steady rhythm of chores being done with careful attention. Elena, still fragile from illness, found herself being carried between the warmth of blankets, the smell of freshly cooked bread, and the gentle attention of Colt's doctor. Every day, she watched her children begin to stretch their limbs and their voices beyond mere survival. They played in the yard, ran through dust clouds stirred by hooves, and chased each other around the barn, squealing and shouting with the kind of joy that had been absent for far too long. The sight was almost too much for her heart to bear, but it was a happiness she couldn't help but feel in her bones. One evening, the sun lowering the sky to brilliant streaks of pink and gold, Elena stepped onto the porch wrapped in a quilt Colt had draped around her shoulders without ceremony or word. She surveyed the yard, her gaze catching on each child, Liddy helping the youngest feed a pony, Jonas leading the smaller boys in stacking firewood, the toddlers toddling after a playful dog, their laughter blending into the evening like music. They're happy, she whispered, more to herself than to anyone. Colt appeared beside her, leaning casually against the railing. His eyes followed hers, watching the children like he'd been born to care for them, and his voice was calm, sure. They're home, he said simply. Elena turned to him, uncertainty in her eyes. You barely know us, I mean, you've seen us for just a few days. You don't have to carry our burdens. The words were a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. Colt's expression softened, and he stepped closer. Burden, you think this is a burden? He shook his head, almost in disbelief himself. You've spent your whole life hearing that you're too much. But I look at you all, I see exactly what I've been missing. His eyes swept over the children again, and then back to her. A family, life, a place that matters. That's not a burden, that's a blessing. Tears brimmed in Alina's eyes, a mixture of relief and wonder. She swallowed hard, unable to speak at first. Her fingers tightened around the quilt, knuckles white. Nobody ever wanted me, or my 9 babies, she admitted, her voice breaking. Everywhere we went, people, they said we were too much. Too many, too needy. Colt looked at her steadily, his jaw firm, but his eyes gentle. Good, he murmured, the word carrying weight. Because I want all of you. She blinked, searching his face, as if to see whether he was joking. But he wasn't. There was a sincerity in his gaze that settled in her chest like a warmth she hadn't felt in years. For the first time, Elena allowed herself to believe it, truly believe, that she and her children had found a place where they belonged. Slowly, she reached for Colt's hand. Their fingers intertwined naturally, like they'd known each other longer than days. The wind blew softly across the porch, carrying with it the scent of wildflowers and the faint tang of horses, and in that moment, the world outside seemed to fade. The hardships of the trail, the loneliness, the hunger, and the cold all felt like shadows that could no longer reach them. Inside the house, the children laughed over a game Colt had taught them, their voices carrying through the open windows. Liddy, now smiling without reserve, peeked over the doorway and caught Alina's eye. In that small glance, a promise passed between mother and daughter, that this was their home now. That safety and love were not just fleeting illusions but real, solid, and theirs. Colt leaned down, brushing a loose strand of hair from Alina's face. You've been strong all your life, he said quietly. But now you don't have to be alone anymore. You've got me, you've got your children, you've got this ranch, and I'll see to it that no one ever tells you you're too much again. Alina's lips curved into a tentative smile, a fragile but undeniable bloom of hope. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the yard, and she realized something she hadn't in years, she could breathe. Not just because she wasn't running, not just because she was no longer alone, but because she felt the unspoken truth of Colt's words. Her family was whole, her children were safe, and finally, she was wanted. And for the first time in her life, Elena allowed herself to imagine a future where she and her children weren't invisible, where they belonged completely to a place that would never abandon them. Colt's presence, steady and unwavering, was a promise that they would never face the world alone again. The wind stirred one last time as the sky darkened, carrying the scent of the prairie into the porch. Elena stood there with Colt beside her, children's laughter echoing in the distance, and she finally let herself believe it. All of them, every single one, were home. And Colt, with a quiet, steady voice that carried more love than she had ever known, said again, I want all of you. She smiled, tears glinting in the fading light, and whispered, then we'll stay. All of us, forever. The ranch was no longer just a place to live. It had become the heart of their lives, a home filled with laughter, hope, and love that had been denied them for so long. And in that golden Wyoming evening, with Colt standing beside her and her children playing freely, Elena knew they had finally found exactly where they belonged.